Okay.
Are we good?
What if there is something that science has proven to be academically and psychologically beneficial? What if this thing was enjoyable, beautiful, and unifying? What if this thing was already intricately involved in our daily lives, society, and economy? And what if this thing was as easy as do, re, mi? Good afternoon, my name is Catherine Bauk, and today I will be discussing the necessity of funding for music education. I'd like to thank Mrs. Jennifer Taylor, who has experience with music therapy, for being my panelist. This is Sammy, a 14-year-old with autism who is a prime example of the powerful effect that music can have. One of Sammy's teachers approached him, asking if Sammy would like to contribute a recorded song for the school's Christmas CD. Sammy was ecstatic about the idea. However, due to his fear, anxiety, and behavioral outbursts, especially when entering enclosed areas, such as a recording studio, this dream seemed impossible. But Sammy was determined to overcome these challenges. As they walked into the studio, Sammy's teacher played the guitar and sang to Sammy to calm him down. Sammy was able to enjoy recording his song, Hokey Pokey, for the school CD. On Christmas Day, Sammy's family gathered around to listen to the song, while Sammy remained secluded in his room. But when he heard his song playing, he emerged from his room, singing, dancing, and spending time with his relatives, which was a rare occurrence. Sammy's family was in tears as they witnessed the powerful change that had occurred in their loved one that was brought about by music. Many families, however, can never experience this joy. 1.3 million students across the United States do not have access to a music program because their schools do not have adequate funding. According to Give a Note Foundation, 38% of high schools rely on fundraising for the majority of their music program budget. But schools that are in lower socioeconomic areas cannot rely on fundraising or parent support to keep their music programs afloat, so they are shut down. Students at these schools should not receive less of an education just because their schools aren't receiving enough funding. That is why state legislation must provide funding for music programs for all grades in public schools because they are academically and psychologically beneficial. Please watch the short video.
Teachers always say you should never give up, but I almost did give up. I wasn't very good at music, not at first, but everyone told me to keep trying. Not just the teachers, the other kids too. Well, I did stick with it, and I'm getting better all the time. I've worked really hard at it, and now I love music so much, I'm glad I was tough enough to stay with it.
I was born with some pretty serious health problems, which also made it hard for me to learn. School was so frustrating. I tried hard, but I just couldn't get it until I started taking music lessons. It was like magic. The better I got at piano, the better I got in school. After a rough start, I actually became an honor student, all because of music.
I never saw myself as a person others would want to follow. When I joined my high school marching band, I was just another face in the crowd. Through that experience, I started to realize that I had leadership qualities. So I grabbed the opportunity, and all of a sudden, everyone was following my lead, following me. Who knows if I ever would have gotten there without music.
In 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. It was intended to hold school districts accountable for ensuring that every student received a good education. It mandated the testing of students in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school in math and language arts. School districts modified their curriculums to focus heavily on math and language arts so that their students did better in these tests. But by believing that the secret to success lied in only emphasizing these subjects, they overlooked an obvious opportunity to benefit their students, and they ignored an entire body of research outlining the academic benefits of educating students in music. For in fact, music education helps students academically. It improves standardized test scores and teaches essential skills. In 2016, the College Board released a study demonstrating the positive influence an arts education has on SAT scores. From 1999 to 2015, students who received at least 4 years of an arts education consistently scored approximately 100 points higher than their non-artistic counterparts. The New England Board of Education released an article outlining the skills that a music class teaches that are also beneficial in other classes. These include enhanced language capabilities, better hand-eye coordination and study habits, problem-solving skills, and teamwork skills. These skills are essential for excellence in the classroom, but also translate into excellence in the workforce. According to Indeed.com, a well-known job site, employers are looking for employees who have good work ethics, can work well in teams, can communicate well, and solve problems. Nina Kraus, a professor at Northwestern University who has experience with the neural encoding of speech and music, was inspired by the Harmony Project to research how the brain reacts to music. The Harmony Project is an LA-based nonprofit organization which provides musical instruction, instruments, and support to children in lower socioeconomic areas. Their students excel. 98% of them graduate and are accepted into college. They rise to the top of their classes, pursue successful careers, and receive scholarships. In short, their lives are changed because of this program, and Nina Kraus and her colleagues wanted to know why. They researched how musical training affects hearing and language capabilities, attention, and memory. After 2 years, they found that students who received musical training rose far above their peers in these areas. However, it took 2 years for these results to develop. That is why, if schools want their students to do better academically, they must provide them with an education in music from kindergarten through 12th grade. Music education also benefits students' psychological development. It improves mental health and social-emotional development. With depression rates rising, especially in youth, a solution is needed, and that solution can be music education. In 2011, the Southwest University in China conducted a study that showed that college students who participated in a group music therapy session received a decrease in depression and increased mental health after participating. They said that music provided a release and an escape from the stressful environment of college. Additionally, the University of Vermont conducted a study that showed that music lowers anxiety because it thickens the cerebral cortex faster. Music education also improves social-emotional development. According to Greater Good magazine, there are 4 ways that music does this. First, music class increases contact, cooperation, and coordination. Next, music provides an oxytocin boost, which is important in building relationships and trust with others. Music also promotes cultural cohesion. And lastly, music activates a specific part of the brain that allows us to better empathize with others. All of these ways that music helps us better connect with others are important and should be taught to children from an early age. While listening to each other while creating a cohesive sound and expressing their emotions in a healthy way, kindergartners to seniors can develop their social skills. In an interview with Mr. Jeremy George, a local band director at Rickards High School, he said, "Band offers a social setting as well as a musical setting. It allows students to be in an educational environment without the stress of a core academic classroom. Also, music is a form of expression that is beyond words. Both of these help with mental health issues. Music class benefits students in a way that no math or language arts class ever can. Christians should value music education additionally for its themes of glorification and evangelism. Music and song is a main way that we glorify God. Colossians 3:16 says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God." The Israelites praised God through song after he delivered them from Egypt. Mary praised God through song after the birth of Jesus. And David, throughout the Psalms, praised God through his joy and despite his sorrow. Music can also be a very helpful evangelism tool. Songs can cross language barriers and act as helpful memory tools. Missionaries gain an incredible advantage if they are musically trained. They can lead others in worship and teach essential doctrine in a way that can be remembered easily. Matthew 5:16 says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Christians evangelize by the way that they live their lives. Music helps children develop godly virtues, such as the fruit of the Spirit. Music evokes joy and peace. It develops faithfulness, self-control, and patience because it is a skill that requires time and practice. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he is old, he will not depart from it." Children must be trained up in music. Timothy Schaefer, a professor of music, describes how music has been used throughout Scripture to comfort people. He says, "Scripture connects the use of music to human emotion. For example, 1 Samuel 16 tells us that when David played his harp, it brought relief to Saul, made him feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him." Even Aristotle, who was never a Christian, once said, "Music has the power of producing a certain effect on the moral character of the soul. And if it has the power to do this, it is clear that the young must be directed to music and be educated in it." Music is an important part of the life of every Christian, and therefore every Christian must be a strong advocate for it. Music education is tremendously valuable and worth the money and time required, for in reality, it is an investment in the future. Now, what can be done to ensure that every student receives music education? Thankfully, many people have already recognized the problem with funding for music education and have worked towards solving it. Advocates for music education, such as Florida Senator Perry, have argued for legislation that provides more funding. The Early Childhood Music Education Pilot Program provides funding for schools' music programs per student, which qualifies. 10 schools in Florida have already received funding because of this program. But this is not enough. The problem is far from being solved. You can help in many ways as well. You can talk with your local representatives and senators to advocate for more legislation like this that provides funding for music education. You can also donate instruments, money, or your time to local schools' music programs. You can also donate to foundations that support music programs, such as the Give a Note Foundation, the Harmony Project, and the NAMM Foundation. All of these small things, when done by people across the country, can have a lasting impact on the next generation's education. Thank you.
I had to repatriate back to the United States for university. And I remember waving to my parents uneasily as they got on a plane to go back to Malaysia for the first time without me. I was standing firmly on American soil, the land of my birthplace and the country of my passport, but definitely a foreign land. And the next 3 months can only be described as comical. I assimilated back into Southern California living in the same inconspicuous manner as Eddie Murphy blends into New York when he goes in Coming to America. I didn't know how to get around. I didn't know what an ATM was used for, nor what an ATM machine would ever look like. I didn't understand free refills on soda, and I sure as heck did not know anything about parking.
What do me and Mr. Mark McElroy have in common? We can't answer this question. Where are you from? It's a simple question to most commonly used to get to know someone that you've just met for the first time. And most people would answer with, I'm from Florida, or I'm from McCullough, and so on. However, if you're like me and Mr. McElroy, it's a little bit more of a complicated response. Let me give you some background. I grew up to an American family in a small Asian country called Thailand. And so this influence from my American home and the Thai culture around me created the unique third culture that I grew up in. So what is a third culture kid? A third culture kid simply means a kid who is brought up in a culture different from that of their parents. So what makes them so special? Well, they develop some certain skills that help them to become great academic students, socialites, and better in the workplace. So, more American parents should give their kids the opportunity to have a third culture experience. The academic benefits are astounding. Most TCKs develop certain traits such as flexibility, adaptability, and quick learning that are extremely helpful in school. Now, these traits are developed when a third culture kid is thrown into a new situation, such as learning a new language, which will help them communicate with those around them, or moving to a new country, leaving behind everyone that they've known and the culture that they grew up in. These skills that are developed in third culture kids from an early age become extremely useful in challenging courses such as math. If you roam the halls of community Christian school and you ask students what their most difficult subject is, most would answer with math, because it is a very challenging subject. New material was built on by subjects that you learned in previous years or previous weeks. And so you have to be adaptable and flexible in order to overcome this challenge and learn new material quickly. Whereas a normal student might seem stressed out or be frightened by this challenge, a third culture kid hops into it naturally. They're used to overcoming challenges and adapting to situations quickly. And so this is extremely helpful in the classroom. They also go farther with their academic careers. As you can see here, 90% of third culture kids have some sort of post-secondary education. Whether that be having some sort of education in college, graduating with a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD. 30% of third culture kids graduate with a master's or a PhD, as opposed to 13% of their non-TCK counterparts. This shows that TCKs have an avid love for learning, and this quick learning skill that they develop helps them go on to be great in their academic careers. It also helps them in their social lives. Third culture kids grow up around a lot of people that are not like them. I had a lot of friends from a lot of different countries: German, Brazilian, Thai, Korean, you name a country, I probably knew someone from there. And this cultural difference in the people that I knew helped me break cultural boundaries. This is essential in American society. There's a little bit of a problem with American adolescents who have trouble communicating with people outside of their culture and adults. Now, this awkwardness between people that are different from you, people that are older from you, comes from this desire to want to coagulate with people that are like you, and that's a natural tendency for humans. We want to be around people that are like us, but third culture kids naturally break this barrier from an early age and develop the skill of communicating with people unlike them very easily. And this is very important when becoming a leader. Leadership is very important to community Christian school. It helps grow young students and develop certain skills in them that are later useful in life. And it's the same for third culture kids. I went through a lot of sites, and the best site that I found that had a good authority on leadership is Kununu. Funny name as it might be, Kununu is a subsite of LinkedIn, which is a job searching website. And so they have a pretty good authority on what it takes to be a good leader, especially in the workplace. They came up with a list of 21 different traits that it takes to be a good leader, and I narrowed it down to 7 that third culture kids develop very easily. Among them, resilience, patience, and open-mindedness. Now, these skills are extremely useful when becoming a good leader because you have to be resilient when you're a leader, and you have to have patience with your teammates, and you have to have open-mindedness when dealing with them and communicating with them, especially if they're not like you. And so these skills help TCKs later in life, especially in the workforce. I went through some more sites, about a dozen of them, on what employers look for when seeking a new employee. Across every single list, these 4 traits were common: communication, teamwork, flexibility, and resilience. As you may notice, these are skills that I've already mentioned in my previous arguments. Communication and teamwork are built by the social and cultural boundaries that are broken when third culture kids are introduced to a new society. Flexibility and resilience are built by the same. And so when employers are looking for an employee, they're going to be looking for these soft skills. Now, soft skills, as opposed to hard skills, are traits or characteristics rather than a science or a study. A job gap study done in Florida showed that 90% of employers look for soft skills over hard skills when hiring a new employee. This means that if you apply for a job, you have a 90% chance that your skills and characteristics are going to get you hired rather than your grades. This is extremely important when developing a young kid in order to make them successful in life. Third culture kids develop 3 basic workplace skills that are extremely useful: adaptability, a broad worldview, and being forward-focused. Adaptability speaks for itself. It is the ability to be thrown into a new situation, adapt quickly, and overcome challenges. Third culture kids are sometimes described as cultural chameleons. You could put us in a certain culture, come back in a week, and not be able to distinguish us from the natives, because we assimilate naturally. It's part of who we are, how we grew up. It just becomes natural to us. And the broad worldview is developed very easily by this. We see different cultures and recognize that they are different and use that in our day-to-day lives. And forward focus is a term meaning that you're not worried about past mistakes or what's behind you. You're worried about what's in front of you, and you're very task-oriented. Third culture kids, on average, live in 4 to 5 countries in their lives and move approximately every 2 to 3 years, meaning that they have to leave behind friends, family, their homes, and their culture about every 2 to 3 years. They have to be forward-focused, or they won't survive. This is a trait that is very commonly developed very easily by third culture kids and is extremely helpful in the workplace. And these traits all help third culture kids be great in jobs that are fast-paced, such as therapy, management, and teaching. Now, after all that I've said, why would someone not want to be a third culture kid? There are some significant downsides. Some people would argue that this grief and the loss that third culture kids develop can be very psychologically demanding. And this is true. This is a list of common things that third culture kids struggle with: depression, anxiety, no sense of belonging, all sprouting from their lack of sense of identity and feeling like no one understands them because no one has their experience. This is very true. I've struggled with depression for 5 years. But that is not from a root of my third culture experience. It's a root from being bullied. And that's a common human experience. And so this issue is not isolated within third culture kids. It's a part of being human. 7.1% of children across the globe are diagnosed with anxiety, and 3.2 of the same are diagnosed with depression. If you have one, you're 10% more likely to have the other. That means approximately 1 in every 10 children across the globe struggle with depression and/or anxiety. So as you can see, this issue is not an argument against third culture kids. You're arguing about being human, which you can't avoid. Third culture kids also develop perseverance and resilience, which can help them overcome this grief and depression that they struggle with so often. Now, when it comes to biblical integration, the Bible has a lot to say about third culture experience, albeit not outright. Some examples of third culture kids in the Bible are Joseph, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I'm not suggesting that you kidnap children and throw them into an oppressive society, which is what they went through. That's bad and illegal. Don't do that. But they are an example of the powerful effect that bringing in a second culture to another can have on people's lives. With the power of God and their experience in a different culture, these men help solve a pressing issue in the society that they were moved into. Jesus called us to be disciples into all nations. And most of us know this, and it's a very common thing that people say. However, if you think more critically about it, you can't share the gospel the same way with an American man and a Buddhist man. Paul builds on this point by saying, "To the Jews, I've become the Jews in order that I might win the Jews. To the weak, I've become the weak in order that I might win the weak. I become all things and all people that I might save them through Christ." Paul is saying that he adjusts his gospel presentation based on who he's talking to. For example, if you gave a gospel presentation to an American, you would most likely include the promise of eternal life, because a common view on life after death in America is that there is none. And so the promise of eternal life is very enticing. However, if you use the same argument for a Buddhist, you might turn them away. See, Buddhists believe in reincarnation, which is being rebirthed into a new body after death. They want to reach what's called nirvana, which is essentially an enlightened non-existence. They already have eternal life. That's what they want to get rid of. So instead, you should present them with a God who can overcome demons. Buddhists believe that demons are oppressive and that they have power over them. They fear them and sacrifice to them in order that they might leave them alone or not harm their families. And so this God that has the power to crush those that they fear would be much more enticing than the promise of something that they want to get rid of. And you wouldn't know that unless you knew about the Buddhist culture and the Buddhist religion. And while you can do a Google search on all of this, third culture kids develop this awareness that cultures are different, and you have to cross cultural barriers in a different way in order to win them. And this is extremely important when you're raising young Christians. In conclusion, third culture kids develop academic, social, and workplace benefits as a result of their third culture experience. Where are you from? It's a question I want less people to be able to answer. Thank you.
On December 2nd, 1942, the world's first self-sustaining nuclear reactor went online. It was made up of 57 layers of graphite and uranium, set in place by 30 high school dropouts who needed a little money before joining the Army. A little after lunch on December 2nd, the control rods that slowed the reaction were carefully pulled out of the reactor, and at 3:25, the reactor went critical, and bottles of champagne were opened to celebrate the occasion. The whole time, there was a man standing there with an axe and a rope tied to the final control rods, and if anything went wrong, he was to slam the axe down, cutting the rope, slamming the final control rods into place, and shutting off the reaction. This is an urban legend, but this is said to be the origin of the word SCRAM, Security Control Rod Axeman. Since then, nuclear energy has been put on ships and in submarines, in bombs and in smoke detectors, and in electrical plants like the one just an hour and a half away from here in Columbia, Alabama. Hi, my name is David Buckner, and I'm here to tell you about nuclear energy. My panelist is James Totten, a doctoral student at the University of Florida studying thermal hydraulics and advanced reactor designs. But first, to convince you that we need nuclear energy, I need to convince you that we shouldn't be using fossil fuels and renewable energy to produce our electricity. Fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels creates a lot of pollution, and in 2019, it's estimated that about 1.2 million people died in China last year due to air pollution. The Global Alliance on Health and Pollution also estimates that about 110,000 people in the United States also died from air pollution. Coal releases more greenhouse gases than any other major electricity source, yet produces 40% of the world's electricity share. We are using the dirtiest form of energy the most. The mining of coal also has serious environmental impacts. In mountaintop removal mining, entire mountains are quite literally leveled in the pursuit of coal. And in the mining process, ponds are created that are full of toxic materials and elements such as arsenic and lead, and are full of radioactive contaminants. These ponds are labeled high risk by the Environmental Protection Agency because of the materials they contain. In 2008, in Kingston, Tennessee, there was an ash spill at a holding pond at the Kingston coal plant. Now, when this spilled, it released 10 times more ash than the Deepwater Horizon spill released oil. There was a cleanup effort to clean up all of this ash, and in the 10 following years, at least 36 of the workers that cleaned it up have died from cancers that were almost certainly caused by the materials they had to clean up. In 2018, there was a 10-year reunion of the accident, and it was noticed that an unusually high number of the workers who returned were holding inhalers due to medical conditions they had. The drilling for oil and fracking also pollutes local water supplies. Each fracking well uses about 4 million gallons of water in its lifetime. The US alone contains about 300,000 of these wells. Behind me, you see a pretty map of the United States at night. You're like, oh, I can see where Atlanta is, or I can see New York. But if you look at the top left of North Dakota, you see a bright patch, and you're like, whoa, I didn't know there was a big city there. There's not. That is actually a giant oil field, and the light you see is from the flare gas they are burning, which is excess methane that they are required to burn to keep it from getting into the atmosphere. But by burning it, they also release large amounts of CO2, and you can see the burning from space. Now, we move on to why renewables cannot make up our electricity. Capacity factor basically tells you how reliable an energy is. The higher the capacity, the more time it's able to operate and produce power. Nuclear energy has a capacity factor of about 94%. But solar energy only has a capacity of about 25%. That means only a quarter of the time it's able to produce electricity. The main problem with renewable energies is that the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and if they're creating excess energy in the middle of the day, we cannot store this energy. It just gets wasted and not used. In Texas right now, they're having massive blackouts because Texas relies on 20% of their electricity from wind. In the cold conditions, the ice has stopped up the wind turbines, and the wind turbines are not creating electricity. And Texas doesn't have enough fossil fuel capacity to take over for this, and so they're not able to produce enough electricity for all their citizens. And so people are under massive blackouts. A theorized solution to this is something called a supergrid. A supergrid would connect vast tracts of land with each other, say France to Ukraine. And it's theorized that by doing this, if France wasn't producing a whole lot of renewable energy one day, but Ukraine was, Ukraine would be able to send their electricity through transmission lines to France. But this would cost sums of money, probably well into the trillions of dollars, and it would not be safe. Say a terrorist wanted to make cities in France go dark, and if France was receiving most of their electricity from Ukraine, all they would have to do is cut or blow up one or two transmission lines across the thousands of miles area, and they could make entire cities go dark. Now, we move on to nuclear energy. The main problem with nuclear energy that some people see is that it's expensive. But nuclear power doesn't have to be expensive. In 2019, renewable sources received at least 30 times the subsidies that nuclear energy did. If some of these subsidies were applied to nuclear energy, the cost of nuclear could drop drastically and even be competitive with some fossil fuels. Another thing driving up the cost of nuclear energy is excessive and irrelevant regulations that extend the construction time. In 2008, Obama appointed Gregory Jaczko to be chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Now, you would think the person in charge of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which regulates all nuclear in the United States, would be a pro-nuclear activist. But no, Gregory Jaczko actually hates nuclear energy. He was appointed specifically because of his hate for nuclear energy, to appease a senator in Nevada. During his tenure as chairman, he got the Yucca Mountain Waste Depository shut down. Yucca Mountain was to be a place where the United States could put all of its spent nuclear fuel for the next centuries or even thousands of years and be safe and release no radiation into the outside environment. But Gregory Jaczko got this shut down. Now, we don't necessarily even need Yucca Mountain because we actually have these reactor designs that can reprocess and reuse spent nuclear fuel. But due to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which prevents the reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel, these designs actually cannot be built. Now, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was supposed to keep some countries from getting nuclear weapons and testing them. Now, in many cases, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has failed us, and many of these countries have actually received nuclear weapons. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, talking about reprocessing spent nuclear fuel in a reactor used for electricity just isn't reasonable because these reactor designs are amazingly efficient. Nuclear energy actually emits 1/4 of the CO2 emissions of one of the greenest energies we usually think of, solar. Now, the main problem in the public mind is about nuclear energy is radiation. Like, if I get exposed to radiation, will I develop a second head? No, you will not. But 3 things come to mind when we think of nuclear energy and radiation disasters. We think of Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima. According to the World Health Organization, Chernobyl killed about 4,000 people. Now, only about 50 or so of these people died within a month or 2 of the accident. Most of the remaining 3,900 or so actually died because the Russian government did not stop milk produced from cows in the region from being sold. And children who drank this milk would get high levels of radioactive iodine that the cows had gotten from the grass they were eating in the Chernobyl region. And this radioactive iodine would get into their thyroid glands. And later in life, this would cause thyroid cancer and other types of cancers for these children, killing thousands of them. Genesis 1:28 tasks us with taking care of the earth. And in Psalm 24:1, it says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein." We are tasked with taking care of the earth and stewarding it. We are supposed to take care of what is the Lord's, and But fossil fuels are hurting our environment, and we are not taking care of the environment when we use fossil fuels. We are hurting it. And renewable energy cannot take over for fossil fuels and produce our electricity. Nuclear energy has the capacity to produce all the electricity we need and safely. There are these amazing new reactor designs that aren't actually new. Some of them are upwards of half a century old, but due to regulations imposed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, they are still not here. These designs are safer, more efficient than the reactors we have today. We have reactor designs that can fit on the back of a semi-trailer, and some of these can actually operate while on the back of the semi-trailer. We have reactor designs that can operate for upwards of 80 years, but these reactor designs are still not out there because they're being stifled by high upfront costs. We need nuclear energy in order to save the lives of millions of people a year, to preserve the environment, and to provide cheap, reliable energy. Thank you.